Hi, this module is going to be on the MBTI. This is the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, also known as the 16 personality types, or the 4 dichotomous preferences. You can kind of call it what you like, but most people call it the MBTI. And the aim of this module is acceptance. Hopefully after this module, you will learn to accept differences in others, especially in your delegates, and respect those differences, rather than believing in this idea that there's a perfect delegate or a perfect chair, or that you want to see certain characteristics in a certain person. But instead, hopefully after this module, you'll understand more that people are just very different, work in different ways, and that if you can respect those differences, then people can work well together, and hopefully then your committee can actually start working as a proper team. So, most of this, I just wrote in quite a long essay. I had to read about maybe 5 or 10 books on this, in which I read lots and lots of critiques, people who really don't like this personality test. People who do love it, I've read lots around it, and this is my favourite book here, and a lot of what I'm discussing today comes from this book. So just in case you want it, there's the reference. So just a few things first of all is you will probably have read that lots of people discredit this. The media says that academics, there's lots of articles I've read in the media that say academics have abandoned the MBTI, it's useless and stuff like this. But then again, that's just media. Media like to punch these headlines, which is not very factual. The thing is, with academics, they find, many academics, not all of them, find 3 main problems with this personality test. First of all, they say that there's not 16 personalities, but instead 4 dichotomous preferences. What does this mean? Well, the MBTI, when you do this test, it will give you a set of 4 different letters. For example, I am ENTP. I could be INTP, I could be ISNP or INSJ, etc. There are 16 different 16 different types within that. So what lots of academics actually say is the only difference between an INTP and an ENTP is their preference towards extroversion compared to introversion, and that they don't actually create 2 distinct personality types. So many academics say that there aren't 16 personality types, but the test does show preferences towards certain things. So certain parts of your behaviour and personality you have preferences towards, but it does not create a type. So that's one of the big critiques. Another one is the idea that Myers-Briggs based a lot of this on Jung's theories, and many academics say that actually, if you actually look at Jung's theories and have a look at this, you don't have much validation for this test, which basically means that the test isn't measuring Jung's theory as well. If you were going to accredit this test by saying yes, it measures the theory well it would pass. It wouldn't pass, it would fail. So what this basically means is that the test is measuring something, but it's not Jung's theories. Instead, it's closer to what we call the big 5 personality types, which leads us to the third point, which is the big 5 personality types is becoming more and more known and more used as personality type indicators, instead of the MBTI, because it's got a lot more scientific backing behind it. And they say when you go for the big 5, you'd no longer need this. So these are some of the main critiques, but none of these critiques get in the way of what this module is about. This module isn't about necessarily self-understanding and classing yourselves into personality types, but it's more about understanding that other people can be different compared to you. And maybe we have to accept these differences if you want to work with them. So that's the first thing I want to say, is that you probably won't be able to find a critique that will say that the part on MBTI that we're going to cover today is not valid or not reliable, or there's an issue with it, because what we're covering is just the acceptance of others part of it. So there are 4 different set of preferences according to the MBTI. As you probably know, there's extroversion versus introversion. There is sensing versus intuition. They write intuition with an N because the I is already used for introversion. There's thinking versus feeling. And then last but not least, there's judging versus perceiving. Now, don't get too wound up on the names of them. The name doesn't necessarily tell you a lot for most of these. Like, I read this really good quote of a guy saying, this scholar, he said, we need to choose if we want to call this animal a leopard or a panther. We could spend years discussing this, but it doesn't really help us. What helps us is understanding what it is, this animal. You see, the name doesn't necessarily tell us everything, so you can debate for years about exactly what should you call this or what should you not call this. For example, perceiving really doesn't tell you much about this, about what this characteristic really is, but instead what we're going to do in this module is actually understand the fundamentals about each one of them, so we can understand that there are different types of people. Okay, so don't get too wound up about the names and the labels that were being used. So I'll be using a lot of paper for this because it's quite academic and I want to make sure I'm getting things right rather than just going a bit more improv. So first of all, extroversion versus introversion. This is probably the one that you've heard again and again and again, and probably heard a lot of it kind of wrong. As in, most people think of extroverts as these really big social animals who party and stuff like this, and introverts are the shy people in the corner who don't like that. This is quite wrong. This is not the extroversion-introversion dichotomy. Many extroverts are extremely shy, many introverts are extremely sociable. It happens that is not how the dichotomy works. Instead, it's where you draw your energy from, how you receive your energy. So for example, if staying in a house by myself for a month, just by myself, and I feel this real need to interact with people. I'm really craving this, I'm really missing it. I feel kind of drained and there's something not right with me. Maybe I'm pushing more towards a preference of extroversion. But if I'm constantly with other people, let's say in a long EYP session and we're just always with other people, we don't get this alone time, and I really enjoy it, but it just drains my energy so much and it takes up so much of me that afterwards I do need to retreat and just spend like a day or two in my room just chilling out with some music or something. Or maybe I'm more of an introvert to this preference. You see, it's about where we get our energy from, not necessarily what we like to do, but where our energy comes from, where that drains us. So for example, extroverts tend to be more active. They gain their energy from others, like I said earlier. They want to because of this, they tend to want to experience things to understand them. So, and this you could probably find in lots of your delegates. They're the ones who are going to be trying to do things in order to understand what it is. Whereas introverts, on the other hand, want to understand things before they try them. So let's say if we were to play in like the magic stick or something like that, and like an extrovert may go straight ahead saying, okay, well, let's try it out, I've got to try it to be able to understand what's going on here with this game. Whereas maybe the introvert would prefer to say, I want to understand what this game is, what it's about, why we're doing this, before I try it. It's more this, what one scholar described it as a kind of a stutter before starting something. This idea of, let's say a gun goes off, extrovert would be running straight away, introvert would think, okay, I should run. It's that quick stutter before actually going out and doing something. So extroverts, they tend to like variety. They work, like I said, by trial and error a lot. Speaking with others really helps them, and they love to work with people. Whereas the introverts, their counterparts, they can be a lot more persistent. They want to, like I said, they want to understand something before trying it. They prefer a quieter place to work in. They're more cautious in a new environment. When you put them in a situation they're not used to, they tend to be more cautious. Like this kind of, like I said, the bit of a stutter before going out for something. Doesn't necessarily mean they won't want to interact in something, but they're slightly more cautious before that interaction actually happens itself. They tend to think a lot more before speaking. And I read a really good quote. It was actually in this book by Rowan Bain. He said, I, as an extrovert, cannot understand how an introvert thinks. He said that I never think before I speak. I can't understand somebody who has to think before they speak. So I have to understand that I don't understand them. Do you see what I mean? This is what I'm talking about with delegates, as in maybe if you are an extrovert or if you are an introvert, it's quite difficult to understand a delegate who's not the same as you. So we need to have more of an acceptance rather than, okay, this person is like this person is like that. So with introverts, they tend to be more interested, let's say when they're in conversation, they tend to be more interested in their own response rather than the social interaction and understanding what the other person says and trying to understand that. And rather than working with people, they would much prefer to work with data and ideas. So for example, let's say in committee work, they're having a nice discussion. Well, maybe delegates who have more of a preference towards, and I say towards because it's not one or the other, towards extroversion, would prefer to continue this discussion, really talk it out, different ideas, etc. Whereas maybe those delegates who have a preference towards introversion, they would prefer to split into smaller groups and to analyse things maybe, to then play with these ideas, look at this data, etc. Maybe they would much more prefer this because it would be more suitable for them. So if you're in this group setting and they're having these conversations and you see certain delegates who aren't getting as involved, but they're getting more involved in the smaller groups where they're actually dealing just with the fundamental ideas themselves, maybe it's because of a natural preference that they have, and not necessarily because they're a good or a bad delegate. It's just the way they are. So, there's lots and lots of research actually done on shy extroverts and socially skilled introverts. Here, there's a few good papers here. There's one by Rowe. Where are we? Rowe in 1989, and a good one by Duck, 1992, Jamal, 1991. I can upload these references afterwards. Some really, really good papers that look a lot into depth in it, because it is something that exists a lot, but we kind of ignore because we think things are too simplistic with this extroversion-introversion dichotomy. Well, this is the first one. This is one that we talk about a lot. These other ones we talk about a lot less. So, sensing versus intuition. What is this all about? Well, this is about our preference towards gathering information. So this is quite important in EYP because it's all about gathering different types of information, so we need to understand that maybe people do have different preferences when it comes to how they receive this information. So for example, the sensing is more about observable things that are observable to their senses, is seeing it, hearing it, feeling it, things which are a lot more tangible. Whereas intuition, people who are more intuitive, prefer to understand things through possibilities, through the meaning of things, and through the relationships between different ideas. So here we have the sensing is much more tangible, factual focus, where intuition is a lot more abstract and connecting different ideas with meaning. And this is how they can understand ideas a lot more. So the main differences between the two, we start with sensing. Actually, we can go between both of them all the time. So with sensing, people who have more of a preference towards sensing in terms of gathering information, they tend to miss patterns and possibilities. Whereas the intuitive counterparts, they would miss the relevant facts and practicalities. So because each one misses one or the other, you can kind of understand why it's so important at times to work in these kind of teams where we do have different types of people, so then your senses will pick up on the practicality side, whereas your intuitives will be more of this imagination kind of abstract pattern kind of side. So the sensings, they prefer the detail, this understanding the process in between things, understanding these steps and the fine details, whereas intuitives would much prefer to see the big picture, to have a look at this general ideas and kind of go over lots and lots of different ideas rather than diving down into depths of certain ones. So here you can already see a big difference in terms of committee work styles, how the delegates would work during committee work. The sensing, they would love to, the S, they would love to focus on what's actually happened. So the factual thing of this has happened, let's focus on this. Whereas the N would focus on the meaning it brings. So if, let's say, there was a fight between two delegates, the S would focus on the fight itself, whereas the N would focus on what this meant. You see this difference between the two. With the S, they prefer, so their way of being creative is being practical and adaptive. Whereas with the N, it's a lot more about generating novelty, about new things. Both are very valid forms of creativity and are really great when they actually work together within this. So with the S, they're a lot more patient, they're really good with detail, but however they are uncomfortable with uncertainty and complexity, which is kind of the opposite to the N, who they much prefer this variety. They're very imaginative, speculative, they're very impatient when it comes to routine. They love to change, like I said, with the variety all the time. And one of the big things that they can do is they link ideas and associate otherwise thought very different things together, which can be really, really good in terms of creativity. So you can kind of have this idea that the N are more in their cloud and kind of very imagination side, whereas the S are very grounded and bringing it back down. So when you have both of them start to work together, this is when you can have something really great for committee work. So you can see more and more of what I'm saying, that there's no such thing as a perfect delegate, but more different types of delegates who are different, and when they work together, you can have something really great. So now, quickly moving on, I won't spend too long on these next two ones. Thinking versus feeling. This is all about how we come to make decisions and how we come to draw our conclusions. There's a misconception here. This isn't about emotions versus rationality and straightforward thinking. That's an oversimplification. It's a lot more deep than that. And with this preference, we see more and more within the research that people can very much be one and the other, and be very much in between more and more. There's lots and lots of research to say that this dichotomy isn't as clear, but it is good to also understand the differences between the two. So these ones I go quite quickly over. So with thinking, they could be a lot more firm-minded, very skeptical. They can be more analytical, logical, very brief and business-like. They're quite critical. They can be more impersonal. So this is like what I said is with the rationality side being oversimplification, but it is kind of, they can be a lot more rational on this perspective. They like to work with clear and concise principles. So setting up a set of principles that should be followed no matter what. Very rigid principles they like to work with. They like to use criteria. So criteria when evaluating something, and always asking the yes/no questions. Will this work? What is the effect of this, etc. Like trying to understand these different things. They're interested in ideas, and they can be a lot more detached from the discussion. As in, they can discuss things, but they won't be emotionally attached to the things that they're saying. So they won't get offended as much from this. Whereas Fs, their counterparts, feeling, they're much more warm and sympathetic. They're aware of other people's feelings, and they're a lot more trusting. They enjoy pleasing others, and they're happy when things are more harmonious, when things fit together nicely. They can be clear and consistent on their values as opposed to principles. So values being the inner core ideas that they have and they want to live by. Those values, they like to stick to them rather than rational principles. So this is one of the big differences that they say between the thinkers and the feelers. They're more interested in emotions rather than ideas, and they do get attached to the discussion. they can be a lot more attached to the discussion that they're having. So they're going to be talking about something that's quite deep. They're going to be a lot more attached to it rather than taking a step back and analysing it. But like I said, you may be thinking you're falling in kind of both at times because, like I said, the research shows that there's not as much distinction between these two as we previously thought or would hope. And the very last one is judging versus perceiving. These names are really, really bad to describe what they actually mean. So if we ignore the names and just call it J and P, I find it a lot more helpful. This is about how we like to live our outer life, which also doesn't really help us much in understanding what this means. So I'll just go describing what J is and what P is, and then within it, talking a little bit how delegates can be a bit different within here and how it can help us. So the J's are very decisive. They're quite industrious and determined to get things done. They like things to be finished and over and done with. They're a lot more organised, very systematic in their work. They take their deadlines seriously. So a quick pause on here for delegates. So maybe us as chairs, we're like, okay, this is good. This delegate is actually following the deadlines. This is good. But this is just the way this delegate works, maybe due to a certain preference. This doesn't mean it's a good or a bad delegate, because maybe this delegate will be good working with other delegates who don't take deadlines seriously, but they need the structure given by this delegate. So it's not an idea of one person being good or bad, but the team complementing each other. So they take their deadlines seriously. They like to have things settled, finished, like I said earlier. And deadlines, really tight deadlines, can be more of a threat and block their work. So if I say you've got 2 minutes to go and there's like 10 minutes work, it can be really difficult for them because they like to get things orderly done on time. And maybe it would actually make them work worse by giving them such tight deadlines. Whereas it's the opposite with P. P loves these tight deadlines. It's like if you have the tiniest deadline, okay, I'm going to work as hard as I can, and this is what actually motivates me. If I have no deadlines at all, I'm just going to procrastinate and not do much. So maybe, let's say, myself, I'm a P. I'm more perceiver than judger, which means that I don't really... I'm really, really thrilled by deadlines. I think they really push me, and I think, oh, that's going to be the same thing for my delegates, so I give them the tight deadlines all the time. But maybe most of my delegates are J's, and I'm actually harming them rather than helping them because I think they're just like me. That's what I mean each time by delegates are different. Each and every one of them, each and every chairperson is also different. Each and every human is different because we have different preferences and different personality types. And when we understand the different types and start to accept them, we start to realise we shouldn't just do what we think is best for us, but understand what can be best for a whole group of different people. So other things about perceiving is they tend to be a lot more curious with ideas. They're very flexible and tolerant. So if you keep changing things around, they can be a lot more adaptable, which can be great, especially in committee work when coffee break suddenly changes or different things happen. They tend to leave things open rather than structure and tight deadlines. And they're really great when it comes to pulling things together at the last minute. So if you think in terms of the two different types of working together well, you have some who are really structured with their deadlines, making sure everyone is hitting the work on target and stuff, and then a big discussion comes up which delays them for a long time and they're running out of time. Well, so then the P's who are going to jump in and be really good at finishing things off at the last minute and good at chasing this deadline and putting everything together. So you see, it's a combination of both. It's not, yeah, this delegate's perfect or that one's perfect. It's about how they work together well. They tend to, they find it difficult to finish things. So when I said that they tend to leave things open, they can do lots of good work at the start, etc. But unless they have this kind of deadline pushing them, they might just leave it as, I've done most of the work, it's okay, I don't have to finish things, rather than the systematic J's of organising, structuring and finishing things. And as I said, they can be very motivated by deadlines. So within these, you don't have to memorise each characteristic of each part. The reason why I really wanted to go over as much as I could about the differences is to show you that there is so much differences, and I hope there's lots of things that I said that you cannot connect with. Like, no, that's not me. Like when I was talking about, let's say, S, maybe you said, no, that's not me at all. Or when I was talking about N, you're like, no, that's not me. I don't understand how people can be like that. I hope that happened, because if it did, it can really show you that maybe the delegates aren't all the way you thought they were going to be. So it's less about thinking, okay, this is my perfect delegates, they're going to work like this, but more providing them a structure in which each one can work together and complement each other's skills and understand how they can work together to form a good team. We are never unlucky with our delegates. That doesn't exist. Delegates are individuals. Some of them may be more academically gifted, some of them may be more socially gifted, some of them may be, everyone has their different personality type, everyone has their different behaviour, etc. Everyone is just an individual, and we tend to prefer those who are similar to ourselves. We tend to like ourselves through other people. If I see that you have a talent that I also possess, I'm going to really, really appreciate your talent and probably like you for it. But what I'm doing by liking you is liking myself. So what I really want to create like a kind of danger zone for is this idea of thinking this delegate is amazing because of this and this characteristic. Maybe what you're actually doing is you're kind of liking yourself because you can be, let's say, a similar personality to them or something like this. And those who are different from you, we tend not to necessarily like as much, but maybe if we start to understand them more and understand their differences and understand how we can work with them, like just like that one example of deadlines. We use deadlines all the time in chairing without even thinking how this can affect different types of people. And maybe you can actually go back. I will be putting all of this online as a PDF as well, so you can go back to it whenever you like and think, okay, well, if I take this chairing decision, how will it affect these different types of people? And you can actually look through the list and understand this more and more. So I hope in general this is giving you a better view of how delegates are different and how you as a chairperson can accept them a lot more rather than judge them.